In the vast darkness between stars, where civilizations rise and fall like waves against cosmic shores, there exists an unspoken rule that has governed galactic society for 10,000 years: never harm the young of a species still growing into its potential. The Zephyrians broke that rule. They thought humans were just another primitive species, soft, weak, confined to a single world. They saw our children as nothing more than specimens for their twisted experiments. They believed our tears were just water, our screams just noise. They were catastrophically wrong. Because what they didn't understand, what no alien species had ever truly grasped, was that human love isn't just an emotion. It's a force of nature. And, when you threaten our children, when you make our mothers weep and our fathers rage, you don't just anger a species. You awaken something that has been sleeping in our DNA since the first human parents stood against a predator to protect their young. Something that turned frightened primates into the apex predators of Earth. Something that made us climb out of caves and reach for the stars. You awaken the protective fury of humanity. And, once awakened, it doesn't sleep again until every threat is eliminated, every enemy is ash, and every child is safe. The Zephyrians learned this lesson. Too late. The morning started like any other on New Eden Colony. Sarah Chen watched her 8-year-old daughter Emma chase butterflies through the tall grass behind their prefab home. The artificial sun of the biodome cast warm light across the settlement, and the recycled air carried the scent of earth flowers that had somehow managed to bloom in alien soil. Sarah sipped her coffee and smiled. 3 years since they'd arrived on this distant world, and Emma had grown from a scared little girl clutching a stuffed rabbit into a confident explorer who spoke to the colony's maintenance robots like they were old friends. The terrors of Earth's overcrowded cities felt like a distant nightmare here. "Mom, look!" Emma called out, holding up a crystalline formation she'd found near the stream. "It's singing." Sarah laughed. Emma had quite the imagination. But, as she walked closer, she heard it too, a faint harmonic vibration coming from the crystal. Strange. Nothing in the geological surveys had mentioned musical minerals. The first sign of trouble came from the settlement's early warning system. A gentle chime that meant incoming ships. Sarah looked up, expecting to see the monthly supply transport from Earth. Instead, she saw sleek vessels that didn't match any human design. They moved like liquid mercury through the sky, their hulls reflecting the biodome's light in patterns that hurt to look at directly. "Emma, come inside," Sarah called, trying to keep the worry out of her voice. But the ships were already landing. The beings that emerged stood 7 feet tall on legs that bent wrong, with skin like polished obsidian and eyes that reflected light in spectrum humans weren't meant to see. They moved with the fluid grace of predators, carrying devices that hummed with unknown energy. Colony Administrator Marcus Webb tried to make contact. Sarah watched from her window as he approached the aliens with his translator device, hands raised in the universal gesture of peace. They killed him with a casual wave of one of their weapons. No warning, no negotiation. Webb simply collapsed, his nervous system fried by some form of neural disruptor. Then, they began their harvest. Sarah grabbed Emma and ran for the emergency shelter beneath their home, but they weren't fast enough. One of the creatures appeared in front of them as if stepping through folded space. Up close, Sarah could see that its obsidian skin was actually covered in microscopic scales that shifted color like oil on water. "Fascinating," it said in perfect English, its voice like wine through broken glass. "The offspring shows unusual neural activity." Emma screamed as tendrils of energy wrapped around her, lifting her off the ground. Sarah lunged forward, but another beam struck her, and her body seized up, every muscle locking in place. She could only watch as they carried her daughter toward their ship. "Please," she managed to whisper through paralyzed lips. "She's just a child." The creature turned its kaleidoscope eyes toward her. "Yes. The young are most suitable for our purposes. Their neural pathways are still forming. More malleable." That word hit Sarah like a physical blow. Malleable. They weren't just taking her daughter. They were going to change her. Across the settlement, other families were being torn apart. John Martinez fought with the fury of a desperate father until they burned him down.
little Amy Sullivan was ripped from her grandmother's arms.
The Thompson twins, barely 6 years old, were carried away while their parents lay helpless on the ground. The aliens, Sarah later learned they called themselves the Zephyrian Research Collective, collected 23 children that day.
23 bright, laughing, dreaming human children between the ages of 5 and 12.
They loaded them into containment pods as casually as scientists collecting specimens. As their ships lifted off, Sarah managed to crawl to her emergency communicator. Her fingers shook as she activated the quantum relay that would carry her message back to Earth.
Earth Command, she gasped into the device. New Eden Colony. We've been attacked.
They took our children. They took our babies.
The response came 12 hours later, after Earth's massive bureaucracy had processed the impossible message.
General Patricia Morrison's voice was tight with controlled rage.
Mrs. Chen, this is General Morrison, Earth Defense Command.
We're dispatching rescue ships immediately.
Can you provide details about the attackers?
Sarah had barely slept, spending the night helping other traumatized parents tend to their paralyzed neighbors. Her voice was raw when she responded. They called themselves Zephyrians.
7 feet tall, obsidian skin, advanced technology.
General, they didn't just take our children for slaves or hostages.
They said they were malleable. They're going to experiment on them.
The silence on the other end of the line stretched for 30 seconds. When Morrison spoke again, something in her voice had changed.
Something cold and final. Ma'am, I need you to listen carefully. Earth is mobilizing every available ship. We will find these creatures, and we will bring your children home. But I need you to gather every piece of information you can about their technology, their weapons, anything that might help us track them. General, Sarah whispered, what if we can't find them in time? What if they hurt our babies before we can reach them? Another pause.
Then, Morrison said something that would later be remembered as the moment humanity's true nature was revealed to the galaxy.
Mrs. Chen, these aliens made one critical error.
They assumed that because we're a young species, we're weak. They confused our compassion for frailty and our desire for peace with inability to wage war. They thought our children were just resources they could harvest without consequence. Sarah could hear something building in the general's voice, like thunder gathering on the horizon.
They're about to learn that human parents don't negotiate. We don't compromise. We don't accept losses.
When you threaten our children, you don't get a diplomatic solution or a peaceful resolution. You get the full weight of human fury, and that fury doesn't stop until every child is home and every threat is eliminated. The transmission ended, leaving Sarah alone with her grief and a growing sense that the universe was about to witness something terrible and magnificent.
Above New Eden, the first Earth defense ships began dropping out of hyperspace.
Not the usual exploration vessels or diplomatic craft, but something the galaxy had never seen before, human warships designed by a species that had spent its entire evolutionary history fighting for survival. The ships were ugly, brutal things covered in armor plating and bristling with weapons that made no aesthetic sense. They looked like they'd been built by beings who understood that sometimes violence was the only language that mattered.
Admiral Catherine Torres commanded the lead vessel, a massive dreadnought called the Righteous Fury.
She stood on the bridge watching the tactical displays, her jaw set in a hard line. Behind her, the ship's AI processed data streams from across human space as the entire species mobilized for war.
Admiral, her communications officer reported, were receiving similar reports from 17 other human colonies. The Zephyrians have taken over 200 human children in the past week. Torres nodded grimly. 200 children stolen by aliens who saw them as experimental subjects.
The numbers were bad enough, but the intelligence reports were worse. The Zephyrians weren't just studying human children, they were modifying them, trying to understand human neural development by dissecting living brains.
Ma'am, her science officer called out, we've got long-range sensor locks on multiple Zephyrian ships heading toward the galactic core.
They're moving fast, but we can track them.
Torres smiled, and it wasn't a pleasant expression. Good. Signal the fleet. We're going hunting. Behind her, a young ensign asked the question everyone was thinking: "Admiral, what if the Galactic Council tries to stop us? Humans aren't supposed to have warships this advanced.
We're technically still a probationary species." Torres turned to look at the young man, and he took a step back at the cold fury in her eyes.
"Ensign, when someone hurts our children, the Galactic Council can go to hell. We're not asking permission anymore.
We're going to find these creatures, we're going to rescue our babies, and we're going to make sure nothing like this ever happens again." She turned back to the displays, watching as more human ships joined the growing fleet. Vessels from every colony, every orbital station, every deep space mining operation.
Humanity was coming together with a single purpose. "Helm," she ordered, "plot a course for the Zephyrian homeworld. Maximum burn."
As the fleet jumped to hyperspace, heading toward a confrontation that would reshape galactic politics forever, Torres allowed herself one moment of doubt.
What if they were too late? What if the children were already beyond rescue?
Then, she thought about her own daughter, safe back on Earth, and the doubt vanished.
Some lines couldn't be crossed without consequences. Some threats demanded total response.
The Zephyrians had awakened something in humanity that had been sleeping since their ancestors first learned to make fire and sharpen sticks to defend their young. Now they would learn what that awakening meant. Dr. Kethvara had been studying inferior species for 3 centuries, but humans presented unique challenges.
The young specimens they'd collected showed remarkable adaptability, even under extreme stress. Their neural patterns defied established xenobiological principles. Standing in his laboratory aboard the research vessel Endless Curiosity, he observed the human offspring through reinforced viewing panels.
The creatures were remarkably resilient. Even after 72 hours in containment, separated from their parental units, they continued to comfort each other instead of descending into individual survival behavior.
Most irregular, he noted in his research log. Human juveniles demonstrate pack bonding that exceeds anything we've documented. Subject 7 Alpha continues to sing to the smaller specimens despite neural stress readings that should render her catatonic. Emma Chen was Subject 7 Alpha.
Despite the fear that made her whole body shake, she kept singing the lullabies her mother used to share. The other children huddled around her, finding strength in her voice.
Amy Sullivan, only 5 years old, clung to Emma's hand like a lifeline.
"I want my mommy," Amy whispered for the 100th time. "I know, sweetie," Emma replied, trying to sound brave like her mom always did when Emma had nightmares.
"But, we have to be strong. Our parents are coming for us." "I know they are." Through the observation window, Dr. Kethvara made another note. The specimens continued to reference their parental units with certainty that bordered on religious faith.
Most species abandoned hope of rescue within the first day of captivity. What he didn't understand was that human children were raised on stories. Stories of parents who moved mountains to save their babies, of heroes who never gave up, of love that conquered impossible odds. These weren't just tales to human children, they were fundamental truths about how their universe worked. The first sign that something had gone wrong came from the ship's proximity alarms. Captain Zethmore rushed to the bridge, his scaled hide rippling with irritation. They were deep in Zephyrian space, surrounded by defensive installations.
"Nothing should be able to threaten them here."
"Report," he commanded his sensor operator. "Sir, we're detecting massive hyperspace disturbances along the outer rim.
Hundreds of ships dropping out of FTL travel.
Unknown configurations." Zethmore's eyes shifted through the spectrum as he processed this information.
"Pirates? Salvage crews?" "Negative, sir. These readings. I've never seen anything like them."
"The energy signatures suggest these vessels are larger than our own capital ships, but they're moving like fighters."
"And, sir."
The operator's voice carried a note of disbelief.
"They're broadcasting a single message on all frequencies. Put it through."
The bridge speakers crackled to life, and a human voice filled the chamber. The universal translator struggled with the emotional undertones, but the meaning was clear.
"This is Admiral Catherine Torres of the Human Defense Fleet. You have taken our children.
You have exactly 1 hour to return them unharmed to the designated coordinates, or we will consider you enemy combatants.
This is your only warning.
Captain Zethmore made a sound that was the Zephyrian equivalent of laughter.
Humans? Those primitive creatures from the Outer Rim? How did they even find us? His tactical officer was already running analysis.
Sir, they appear to be tracking our quantum signatures. Somehow they're following our exact path through hyperspace.
That should have been impossible. Quantum signature tracking required technology that took most species millennia to develop. Humans had barely achieved faster than light travel 50 years ago.
What the Zephyrians didn't understand was that humans had approached space technology the same way they'd approached every other challenge in their history, by refusing to accept limitations.
When told that quantum tracking was impossible, human engineers had built it anyway.
When told that ships their size couldn't achieve such maneuverability, human designers had ignored physics textbooks and built them anyway.
Desperation had made them innovators.
Love for their children had made them miracle workers. Sir, the communications officer reported, the human fleet is demanding direct communication with our research division. They want to speak with whoever is in charge of the specimens.
Captain Zethmore considered his options.
The humans were probably bluffing. Their technology was impressive for such a young species, but they couldn't match Zephyrian firepower.
Still, it might be worth hearing what they had to say before destroying their fleet. Put me through to their admiral. The view screen activated, showing Admiral Torres on the bridge of her flagship. To Zephyrian eyes, she looked like most humans, small, soft, biologically inefficient.
But there was something in her eyes that made Zethmore's ancient instincts whisper warnings.
Captain, Torres said, her voice eerily calm, my name is Catherine Torres. I'm here to collect our children. I strongly advise you to cooperate.
Admiral Torres, Zethmore replied, allowing amusement to color his tone, your offspring are valuable research subjects.
The Zephyrian Collective has invested considerable resources in their acquisition and study.
Perhaps we could discuss compensation for their return? Torres stared at him for several seconds. When she spoke again, her voice had dropped to a whisper that somehow felt more threatening than shouting. Captain, I don't think you understand the situation.
You didn't steal our property.
You didn't capture our soldiers.
You took our children. Our babies. And now you're asking me to pay you to get them back? Something in her tone made Zethmore's scales ripple with unease.
Admiral, you must understand that we are conducting valuable research that benefits the entire galactic community.
These specimens will help us unlock the mysteries of human neural development. Specimens.
Torres repeated the word like it was poison.
You call our children specimens. Behind her, Zethmore could see other humans on the bridge.
Their faces showed expressions he couldn't quite interpret, but his instincts screamed danger. These weren't the reactions of a defeated species begging for mercy. These were the faces of predators preparing to strike. Captain, Torres continued, I want you to listen very carefully.
In 37 minutes, if our children aren't returned safely, we're going to demonstrate something that your species apparently doesn't understand about humans. Do you know what a parent is willing to do to protect their young?
Admiral, surely we can reach some accommodation. No. The word cut through his attempt at negotiation like a blade.
No accommodation. No negotiation. No compromise.
You touched our babies.
You made them cry. You made them afraid. And now you're going to learn what happens when you threaten a human child. The transmission ended, leaving the Zephyrian bridge in uncomfortable silence.
Captain Zethmore tried to convince himself that the humans were bluffing, but something about the Admiral's voice bothered him.
She hadn't sounded angry or desperate. She'd sounded certain. In the human fleet, preparations were reaching a fevered pitch. Admiral Torres walked through the corridors of her ship, checking on her crew.
These weren't professional soldiers, many of them were parents themselves who had volunteered the moment news of the kidnapping reached Earth. Teachers, engineers, farmers, shopkeepers, all united by a single driving purpose. Status report,
she called to her weapons officer. All ships report ready, Admiral. The new plasma cannon arrays are charged, and our fighters are prepped for deployment.
The Zephyrians have defensive platforms throughout this system, but nothing our targeting computers can't handle.
Torres nodded grimly.
Human military technology had advanced at an unprecedented rate in the past decade, driven by the paranoid certainty that someone would eventually threaten their expanding colonies.
They'd prepared for war while hoping for peace. What about the rescue teams? Standing by, ma'am.
Medical teams are ready for traumatized children, and our best negotiators are prepared to handle the extraction if the Zephyrians see reason.
Torres doubted they would.
Something about the captain's casual dismissal of human lives told her that diplomacy was already dead. But she had to try, if only to give her children a few more minutes of life.
Open a channel to the Zephyrian ship, she ordered. This time, Dr. Kethvara appeared on the screen.
The scientist's obsidian features were difficult to read, but Torres sensed amusement.
Admiral, I understand you're concerned about your offspring.
I want to assure you that we're treating them with all the care appropriate for valuable research subjects. Their contribution to science will be remembered long after their individual existence becomes irrelevant. Torres felt something break inside her chest.
Doctor, are you telling me that you plan to kill human children for science?
Oh, not immediately, Kethvara assured her.
We'll need several months to properly map their neural development.
The process will naturally result in their termination, but they'll serve a greater purpose. The bridge went dead silent.
Every human present stared at the screen with expressions that made Torres worry for their sanity.
She could feel rage building around her like a physical force, feeding on itself until the air itself seemed to vibrate with fury. When she spoke, her voice was perfectly steady.
Doctor, thank you for clarifying your intentions. You've just removed any possibility of peaceful resolution.
She cut the transmission and turned to her crew. Every face looked back at her with the same expression, parents ready to tear apart anything that threatened their young. All ships, she announced over the fleet communication system, you heard the alien. They intend to torture and murder human children for research. There will be no negotiation, no surrender, no mercy. We're going to destroy every Zephyrian ship in this system, rescue our babies, and send a message to the galaxy that human children are not test subjects. The response was immediate and overwhelming.
Hundreds of voices spoke as one, yes, ma'am.
As the human fleet began moving toward the Zephyrian positions, something shifted in the cosmic balance. For the first time in galactic history, an entire species was going to war not for territory or resources or political advantage, but for love. The universe was about to discover why humans had conquered their own world despite being physically weaker than most of its predators. It was about to learn that sometimes the most terrifying force in existence wasn't advanced technology or superior numbers. Sometimes it was just a parent who would rather die than let their child come to harm. The hunt was beginning. The battle began with silence.
No warning shots. No final ultimatums.
The human fleet simply opened fire with a precision that defied everything the galaxy understood about their species.
Plasma cannons that shouldn't exist carved through Zephyrian shields like they were made of paper.
Fighters moved with impossible coordination, striking defensive platforms with surgical accuracy. Captain Zethmore watched his tactical displays with growing horror.
His defensive grid was being systematically dismantled by weapons that operated on principles his scientists couldn't identify. How had these primitives developed technology that outclassed Zephyrian engineering?
Sir, his weapons officer called out.
The humans aren't targeting our engines or command centers.
They're hitting every gun, every missile launcher, every defensive system.
They're not trying to destroy us, they're disarming us. That realization sent ice through Zethmore's circulatory system. Civilized species fought to disable enemy vessels and capture prisoners. Primitive species fought to annihilate their enemies completely. But this was something else entirely.
The humans were fighting like exterminators, methodically removing their ability to resist while keeping them alive for what came next.
Aboard the research vessel, Dr. Kethvara felt his ship shudder under impacts.
Through the laboratory's reinforced windows, he could see human fighters swarming around them like angry insects. But they weren't firing on the ship itself, they were carefully targeting specific systems. Emma Chen pressed her face against the containment barrier, watching the lights outside. "They came," she whispered to the other children.
"I told you they'd come."
The other children gathered around her, hope blazing in their young eyes. Amy Sullivan began crying, but, for the first time in days, they were tears of relief.
"How do you know?"
asked Michael Zhang, one of the older boys. Emma smiled, and in that smile was all the faith of a child who had never doubted her parents' love. "Because that's what moms and dads do. They come for their babies. Always."
Dr. Kethvara activated his emergency communicator. "Captain Zethmore, the specimens are becoming agitated. I recommend immediate evacuation to a secure facility."
The captain's response was strained.
"Doctor, we're completely surrounded.
Human ships have disabled our engines, our weapons, even our communication arrays. I don't understand how they're coordinating their attacks, but they're fighting like a single organism." What the Zephyrians didn't understand was that the human fleet was coordinated by something they'd never encountered: artificial intelligence designed not for efficiency or logic, but for love. Every human ship was connected to an AI network that had been programmed with a single, absolute directive: protect human children at any cost. These AIs had analyzed every piece of Zephyrian technology, studied their tactics, and calculated the most effective way to rescue the children with minimal risk. They fought with the cold precision of machines guided by the warm fury of human hearts. Admiral Torres stood on her bridge, watching the tactical display as her ships moved like pieces on a chessboard played by a master.
Status report. All Zephyrian military assets neutralized, Admiral. No human casualties. The research vessel is isolated and defenseless. Torres nodded. Phase 1 complete.
Now came the delicate part.
Signaled the Zephyrian research ship.
"I want to speak with whoever is in charge of our children."
Dr. Kethvara appeared on the view screen, his obsidian features rippling with nervous energy.
"Admiral, surely we can discuss terms for the safe return of your offspring."
"Doctor," Torres said quietly, "the time for discussion has passed.
You're going to open your airlocks and allow our rescue teams to board your vessel. You're going to lead them directly to our children. And you're going to pray that our babies are unharmed."
"And if I refuse?"
Torres smiled, and the expression was cold enough to freeze starlight. "Doctor, take a look at your sensors.
Tell me what you see surrounding your ship." Kethvara activated his displays and felt his nervous system seize up.
Hundreds of human vessels surrounded them in a perfect sphere, their weapons trained on his ship from every angle. But it wasn't the overwhelming firepower that terrified him, it was the discipline. No random positioning, no wasted movement. They hung in space like a mechanical constellation, waiting for orders.
"Doctor, those are parents.
Every single ship out there is crewed by human mothers and fathers who would rather die than leave this system without their children. They're not soldiers following orders, they're families united by love and guided by rage.
Do you really want to find out what they're willing to do to get their babies back?"
The transmission ended.
30 seconds later, the research vessel's airlocks opened.
The human rescue teams that boarded were unlike anything the Zephyrians had ever encountered. They moved with military precision, but their eyes held something that made ancient predator instincts scream warnings.
These weren't soldiers conquering territory, these were parents hunting for their young.
Dr. Kethvara led them through the ship's corridors, his scales shifting nervously.
The humans didn't speak, didn't make threats, didn't even look at him directly.
They simply followed with the patient intensity of hunters tracking wounded prey. When they reached the laboratory complex, the lead human, a woman whose uniform identified her as Commander Sarah Mitchell, stepped forward. Through the containment barriers, she could see 23 human children huddled together in the center of the room.
"Open it," she said quietly. Dr. Kethvara hesitated.
"Commander, I should warn you that the specimens have been subjected to some minor neural probing. There may be psychological trauma that requires." Commander Mitchell turned to look at him, and he stopped talking immediately.
Her expression wasn't angry or threatening. It was something far worse, the look of a mother who had found someone hurting her child. "Doctor," she said in a voice like winter wind, "if you call our children specimens one more time, I'm going to show you what humans do to creatures that experiment on our babies." Open the barrier. The containment field dropped. 23 children ran toward the rescue team, tears streaming down their faces, calling for their parents. Commander Mitchell caught Emma Chen as the little girl launched herself forward, and, for a moment, the hardened military officer was just another parent holding a frightened child. "It's okay, sweetheart," she whispered. "You're safe now. We're taking you home." Emma looked up at her with eyes that held too much understanding for someone so young. "I knew you'd come. I told the others you'd come." Behind them, Dr. Kethvara watched the reunion with growing unease. Something about the children's absolute faith in their rescue bothered him. How could they have been so certain? He got his answer when Emma turned to address him directly. "You took us away from our families," she said with the clear voice of a child who had found her courage. "That was wrong. And now our parents are going to make sure you never hurt anyone's babies again." The simple statement sent chills through Kethvara's exoskeleton. Not because of any threat it contained, but because of the certainty in the child's voice. She spoke like someone announcing the weather, stating a simple, inevitable fact about how the universe worked. As the rescue teams evacuated the children, Admiral Torres received a priority message from Earth Command. General Morrison's face appeared on her screen, and Torres could see the relief in her eyes. "Admiral, please tell me our children are safe." "All 23 rescued, General. Minor psychological trauma, but our medical teams report they're remarkably resilient. They kept each other strong during captivity." Morrison nodded, then, her expression hardened. "Admiral, the Galactic Council has been monitoring our operation. They're concerned about our response. They're calling it disproportionate force." Torres felt anger building in her chest. "General, they stole our children for medical experiments." "Exactly what did the Council consider proportionate?" "They suggest that we file a formal complaint and seek compensation through diplomatic channels. They estimate the process would take 18 to 24 months to resolve." The bridge went silent except for the hum of the ship's systems. Every human present stared at the screen with expressions of disbelief. "General," Torres said carefully, "are you telling me that the Galactic Council thinks we should have waited 2 years while aliens tortured our children to death for research?" "That appears to be their position, yes." Torres looked around her bridge at the faces of her crew. Parents who had crossed half the galaxy in days to rescue children they'd never met. People who had risked everything because love demanded no less. "General, please send the following message to the Galactic Council. The human species withdraws from all diplomatic protocols regarding the protection of our children. Any being, any species, any government that threatens human children will be considered an enemy of humanity. We will not file complaints, seek compensation, or negotiate. We will respond with immediate and overwhelming force." She paused, letting the weight of her words settle. "And, General? Make sure they understand that this isn't a threat. It's a promise." The transmission ended. Around the galaxy, monitoring stations picked up the human broadcast and began transmitting it to their respective governments. Within hours, every major species knew that something fundamental had changed in galactic politics. The humans weren't asking for permission anymore. 3 days later, Emma Chen sat in her mother's garden on New Eden, watching the butterflies dance through the afternoon light. The crystalline formations still sang their strange songs, but now they sounded like celebration instead of mystery. Sarah Chen sat beside her daughter, still unable to quite believe she was safe. The rescue had taken less than a week, faster than any military operation in galactic history. "Mom," Emma said quietly, "the other kids want to know why you came for us so fast. Their parents too, but they keep asking me because I was the one who said you'd come." Sarah smiled and pulled her daughter closer. "What did you tell them?" "I told them that human parents don't leave their babies behind. Ever. No matter what." Across the galaxy,
the Zephyrian Research Collective was learning exactly what that meant. Their ships were being systematically hunted down by human fleets that appeared out of nowhere, struck with surgical precision, and disappeared back into hyperspace. Not destroyed, captured. Every Zephyrian involved in the kidnapping was being arrested and transferred to human custody. Dr. Kethvara found himself in a holding cell aboard a human prison ship, facing trial for crimes against children. His lawyers argued that by galactic law, studying primitive species was perfectly legal. The human judge looked at him with the same cold patience Commander Mitchell had shown and delivered a verdict that would reshape interstellar law. Doctor, you are correct that galactic law permits the study of primitive species. However, you made one critical error. You assumed that because humans are young, we are primitive. You confused our youth for weakness and our compassion for helplessness. Human children are not specimens to be studied. They are the future of our species, protected by every law we hold sacred and every instinct that made us who we are. The sentence was life imprisonment on a human penal world, to be served while studying the very human compassion he had sought to dissect. He would spend his remaining years learning to understand the love he had tried to analyze. The news spread through galactic civilization like a shockwave. Humanity had gone from probationary species to major power in a matter of days, not through conquest or expansion, but through a simple demonstration of what they were willing to do to protect their young. The Galactic Council called an emergency session. Representatives from hundreds of species gathered to discuss the human problem. Ambassador Krillex of the Theta 9 Confederation stood to address the assembly. Honored colleagues, we face an unprecedented situation. The humans have demonstrated military capabilities far beyond what our intelligence suggested. More concerning, they've shown a willingness to use these capabilities without regard for diplomatic protocol. Murmurs of agreement rippled through the chamber. Several species had already withdrawn their exploration fleets from human space, unwilling to risk accidentally provoking a response. However, Krillex continued, we must ask ourselves, what threat do they actually represent? The humans could have destroyed the Zephyrian fleet completely. They could have bombarded their worlds from orbit. Instead, they conducted a precise rescue operation and arrested only those directly responsible for the crime. The Andalori representative stood, her crystalline structure chiming softly. Ambassador Krillex, the humans ignored all established procedures. They made no attempt at diplomatic resolution. Because, came a new voice from the chamber's entrance, diplomatic resolution would have taken 2 years, and our children would have been dead in 2 months. Every head in the chamber turned to see Admiral Torres walking down the central aisle, still wearing her military uniform. She hadn't been invited to speak, but no security force in the galaxy was going to try stopping a human mother who had just rescued 23 children. Honored Admiral, the council chair began, this is a closed session. You have no authority to, I have the authority of a parent protecting her children, Torres interrupted. And, I'm here to make something very clear to every species in this chamber. She walked to the center of the room and looked around at the hundreds of alien faces staring at her. For generations, you've watched species rise and fall across the galaxy. You've seen empires built on conquest, on resources, on technology. You think you understand how civilizations work. Her voice carried clearly through the vast chamber. But, you've never encountered a species like humanity. We don't build empires for glory or conquest. We explore space to find new homes for our children. We develop technology to protect our families. We form alliances to ensure our young can grow up safely. She paused, letting her words sink in. You see our ships, our weapons, our capabilities, and you worry about human aggression. You should worry about human love. Because love makes us do impossible things. Love makes us cross impossible distances in impossible time. Love makes us fight impossible odds and win. The chamber was completely silent. The Zephyrians took our children, and we moved heaven and earth to get them back. That wasn't aggression, that was parenthood. And, if any species, any government, any individual threatens human children again, they will discover exactly what human parents are capable of. Torres turned to leave, then stopped and looked back. Oh, and one more thing.
We're not asking to join your council anymore. We're building something better.
A coalition of species who understand that some things are more important than politics.
Some things are worth fighting for.
As she walked out, representatives from a dozen species stood and followed her.
The galaxy was realigning itself around a new principle. The protection of the young wasn't a diplomatic issue. It was a moral imperative. Emma Chan never knew that her rescue had changed the course of galactic history.
She only knew that when she was afraid and alone, her parents had come for her.
Just like she'd always known they would. Because that's what human parents do.
They come for their children.
Always.